Hi, everyone, and welcome to Beyond the Glass Ceiling Women Leading the AI and Digital Economy. We are so glad you are here. So, I was reading a thread recently where someone asked if AI is eventually going to replace managers. And one of the top comments was, I hope so, because at least an algorithm might finally understand that, per my last email, is a cry for help. Well, while we are not quite there yet, we are certainly living through one of the most significant shifts in the history of technology. And for many of us, that shift feels like a paradox. On one hand, it is incredibly energizing to see what is possible. On the other hand, it can feel deeply unsettling to think about how fast things are moving. And if you're feeling both of those things at the same time, you're in good company because most of us are. But here is the reality: whether we are excited or anxious, the technology is only as balanced as the people building it. If the room where it happens lacks diversity, we are not just missing out on talent, we are building a digital future with a massive blind spot. The question of who gets to shape AI matters enormously. It is the difference between technology that serves everyone and technology that accidentally leaves half the population behind. And today we have the privilege of learning from the women who are actively architecting this new reality. They're not just watching the change happen, they are at the forefront, ensuring that the future of this digital leadership is inclusive, ethical, and visionary. Let me introduce our panelists, and you will see exactly what I mean. Our first speaker is Shikha Khare, Senior Director of Engineering at Uber. Shikha leads engineering for Uber for Business, Uber Health, and Transit, overseeing products that merge technology with real world consumer impact. With over 2 decades of experience, including 15 years in leadership at eBay, she's recognized for a data driven approach to strategy and a philosophy rooted in empowerment and trust. Beyond her technical roles, she's a dedicated community volunteer with Asha for Education and also Loaves and Fishes. Please welcome Shikha Khare. Next, please welcome my friend Nandini Ishwar, Chief Technology and Information Officer at Beam Benefits. Nandini is currently building an AI powered platform to modernize group benefits for small businesses. A seasoned entrepreneur, she co founded the workplace transparency platform Speakfully and served as VP of Engineering at HR Equity following its acquisition. Nandini is a committed advocate for representation, serving on the board of SheTO and working with firstboard.io to elevate women in corporate leadership and STEM. Please welcome Nandini Ishwar. See, I wasn't exaggerating, and we have a lot to get through and limited time, so let's get into it. Shikha, let's start with you.
Yeah, thank you, Sangeeta, for that amazing introduction. And it's a privilege to be here with the Vivan community. I am particularly excited about today's conversation. As you mentioned, we have a lot to talk about what can we do when we are in the room. And I feel like this is an inflection point in the technical evolution that's happening across the world. And we are moving and I'm looking forward to diving deep with all of you to see how can we change ourselves from being the users of AI to the architects of this new industrial revolution that is coming. And so thank you for having me.
Thanks, Shikha. I think we're having a little bit of issue with your voice with coming through. So maybe just a refresh might help. In the meanwhile, Nandini, did you want to say a couple things before we start?
Yeah, absolutely, Sangeeta. It's so fun to do this again with you. Good to see my friend and Shika again. Wonderful panelist to have here. I'm excited to be part of this conversation. especially as you all talk about, the concept of elevating women and investing in it intentionally. I think it's very off the moment topic at the moment. And through my whole career, I've really spent time thinking about, yeah, thinking about the type of energy that we all need to bring in into the table and have the conversation. So now I want to make sure that others don't have to do the same, go through the same trouble. So I think it's a good opportunity and looking forward to a good conversation.
Wonderful. Shika, you're back. Let me start with the first question for you. So, what does leadership look like for women in the age of AI and automation?
Yeah, that's a great question, Sangeeta. And I hope you guys are able to hear me better now.
A little bit
Yeah.
better. Yeah. We'll let you
It's
know if
not
it's
a
going up again. Yeah.
Okay, I hope technology doesn't fail me today. Uh, yeah, I think going back to your question, I think it's a great question, and I'm glad, we are starting with this question here. To understand leadership today, we have to recognize that we are at the very beginning of an industrial revolution, right? That's the state we are in. And last revolution, when it happened, we turned steam and electricity into physical power. Now we are changing the data into intelligence. And with that, we are just using the knowledge that is available in the digital world, but we're asking machines to reason and act for us, right? The two things that stand out for me, there is a fundamental shift that is happening or going to happen in the job description that we have. Just as in the past, it completely changed how we operated in the past. And there is similarity there. The second piece is that our seat at the table, which is a good news that as opposed to the last time, in the last 34 years, there are a lot many women in the workforce.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a much larger role to play in what happens in the future, right? And just making sure, because I didn't see some nods in the beginning, are you still able to hear me well, or are you struggling?
We are struggling a little bit, but it's coming through. So, please continue.
All right. Okay. All right. Let's continue. Right. So going back to the point, right? What does the leadership has been in the last 30, 40 years? It has been mostly around task management and driving efficiency. That part of the job becomes the grunt work of engineering and going to get automated with AI. So what does the leadership look like when the execution is automated? I believe it comes to three things. One is architectural intent. The AI will know how to build the bridge, but it won't know where the bridge goes or how does it help the community. That's when the human leadership comes into picture.
Mm-hmm.
The second is context curation. A is high velocity, but low context. It can generate thousands lines of code, but it doesn't know how is that code going to help the company in the long term. And that's where, again, a leader provides that context to the system. And the third, I think, is the ethical governance. As AI begins to act like, make its own decision, take its own decision on behalf of human, a leader's role is to provide the human in the loop judgment, a critical moral and technical oversight that model simply cannot replicate itself.
Mm-hmm.
So I think just as in the older or the previous industrial revolution, the that did not replace the architects. This revolution will not replace the leaders. We are going to, the women have historically succeeded in a high context and empathetic leadership space. So I think this change is not a threat or something to worry about. It's a force multiplier for us. That's how I take it.
Great. Just in case people didn't hear it, I'm going to just go through your 3 points, Shika, and correct me if I'm wrong, okay? So your first point was about architectural intent, build bridges. That's what AI does, but it doesn't really not know where it's building the bridges to. So, or whether it's helping the community. So that's where we come in. The second one is the context for the code, and the leadership will still have to provide that. And the third was the ethical governance with the human in the loop judgment. And as you mentioned, since women have had years of empathetic leadership experience, we are well geared for it. Am I right? All right.
100%. Thank you
Excellent.
for capturing it.
Of course. No, I just wanted to say it in case people missed it,
Yeah.
with a little bit of the Wi-Fi issues. Nandini, did you want to take a stab at this?
Always, right? I mean, I think Shikha brought some excellent points to the table. I think it's the ethical framework, which is absolutely so natural to women as we have these conversations. Because I was recently looking at it, right? Like there are, the gap is absolutely still very real, but also the momentum that we're seeing with AI is equally real, right? So, how do you essentially make sure that the gap continues to close while we keep that momentum? And I think that's where women engineering leaders can play a pretty significant role. If you think about it, more than half, I think there was some document that I read some time back that says more than half of the women today are identifying that there are gender stereotypes and bias that come out in Gen AI tools. That's not very different from the reality of it, but also it proves that who builds AI matters, right? And what you're putting into it, the data in equal data out, biased data in equals to biased data out. So I think that's going to need to, that narrative needs to shift a little bit. And I think that is where I think women start to play some very critical roles, especially in like leadership, positions. You all, I think when I hear about, Make Tech Purple initiative at Bay1, I think it was incredible to actually see that you were so intentional about some of that work. And that's really now shifted what I believe from like 26% to like 46% in like 4 years. So it's remarkable how that change can be very systemic and how that, essentially can drive the narrative. So very happy to, see some of that trend and that change, but also proof point that we certainly can shape that narrative.
Great. That totally makes sense. So, what would you think? And Nandini, let me start with you. What do you think is the one thing that people are overestimating, and then one thing that they're underestimating about AI right now?
One, am I allowed to say more than one? There's so many. It feels to me like every conversation I go into, it's, there's AI is like this magic wand, right? Like saying, all right, come wave this, and then all the transformation happens overnight. Or like this other thing that I see with lots of organizations, especially when you're like, beyond growth phase, or maybe like pushing enterprise or even enterprise, you're starting to think of everything as being replaced by AI, right? Like the replace everything narrative. Very much an overestimation of the AI capabilities. When you think about the piece that we are not really factoring in, like what, it's that, that compounding effect, right? Like when you basically now start to say, all right, you have a workforce, where the roles are naturally changing. We're having active conversations in every organization today. As the roles are shifting and as they're, it's shape shifting, then you've got to, that I don't think people are necessarily giving it a lot of weight, because without that role readjustment and now redefining what that success criteria looks like, it's going to be very hard to really embark on this journey of transformation. And I think that's a very classic, problem that companies need to go through. So that talent adjustment needs to be very much like, front and center. So that's kind of how I view this as opportunity space for all of us leaders to like bring this conversation to the front and center of our discussions.
Great. And Shika,
Hi.
thoughts?
I know I've been in and out. I hope you can hear me fine now.
I think the hotspot's working better.
I had to actually switch back to Wi-Fi because I started to lose you guys.
Oh,
So back on Wi-Fi, but yeah. And these are not the problem that this is my workspace. If I'm working from home, this is exactly where I work from. So hopefully it stays with me.
Okay, let's try. So the question was, what's the one thing people are overestimating and one thing they're underestimating about AI right now?
Yeah, I think I definitely echo what Nandini was saying. I did the question, but I was here listening to this response. It is, yes, it can, as I said in my opening as well, that it knows how to do things. It cannot know what to do and what is the right thing for the company or for business in the long term or the humanity in the long term. And that is where I think we are underestimating the human and overestimating AI. So that's pretty much, I think, it sums my understanding. And I think we'll have the realization that yes, it has the, it's a very powerful thing with respect to speed. Like it can do things at a very, very high speed. But what is the right thing to do, and how does it help the human race in the long term? Is the thing that human will still have to do.
That's true. Anything we are underestimating about it right now?
I think that's the role of human in it.
The role of humans in AI. Got it.
Yes.
And then, Shikha, another question for you. Are we seeing real progress for women in technology leadership, or is the gap still widening, you would say?
That's a great question, Sangeeta. I was looking at some of the reports that came out this year, and here is what I gathered. I think there is a momentum paradox. Um, on one hand, we are seeing, and I'm seeing it at work as well, that the AI adoption is amongst the women individually is incredible. They are leaning into AI, they're experimenting with the new workflows. Most Probably most proficient power users in the of the workflows at work. There is no lack of ambition or the technical curiosity here. In many ways, I definitely feel women are leading the change for day-to-day productivity. How does it look like? How can we start adopting more? That's definitely happening. Um, However, to your question, the second part of the question is there a structural transition happening? Are we seeing anything around that? And I think there are again, I think there are three ways across the technology where we can assess this. One is the transition point, as I mentioned, that early entry level and the mid level, engineers or people in technical roles. There is no shortage of that. It is that inflection point where you have to enter the leadership level, is where I feel like pipelines slows down. And unfortunately, that has been the situation for the last 10, 11 years. It kind of stagnated there. So that's happening. I feel there is a little bit of a design gap where we are, as you said in the beginning, that are we in those rooms where the
Right.
core infrastructure for AI is getting designed, or are we, the leader who are architecting, or are we setting the guardrails for AI, or bias, like as Nandini was saying earlier, right? Are we in those rooms, right? So that I think is still a gap. And the new work definition, as I mentioned, that the job description is going to change. As the job description changes, are we taking these highly strategic, high influence roles? And I fear that if those are, since it's a new beginning, sort of, if we are not in those roles from day one, I think that there's less, and might continue to see the trends. So as we have seen in the past. So to answer your question in summary, is the gap widening? I think it's shifting. In the short term, we haven't seen as much progress, But again, I'm comparing, the last 30 years with the prior 30 years. We have
Yeah,
definitely many more women in the pipeline and many more women in the workforce. We need to make sure that we have we make huge strides in getting the access and showcasing our skills and being the next frontier in authority roles, etc. Right. So that's would be my uh, hope that this the leaders we are the leaders that define AI and not just the users of the AI.
that's agree completely. Nandini, your take on this?
Totally agree with everything, Shikha, that you said. The next gen is, they're gonna need a seat on the table, and we kind of always start with that, but they're also the ones that are building the table, right? Like building the new
That's
table.
true.
So the narrative is shifting quite a bit, and I think now is the moment for us to make that sort of change. And I think you asked a very important question of, are we in those rooms, right? Are we in those rooms? Are we essentially, like, representing the current state of the state? And are we there trying to find the right type of solutions to move things forward? That really is like table stakes at this point, and pun very much intended with my whole
Right.
table and, and building table narrative. But that, I think, is where we can truly make progress. Does a gap exist? It totally does. And I don't think the AI is necessarily, like, closing the gap at all. If anything, if we're not mindful and if we're not in front of the problem, we run the risk of widening it very quickly with much higher velocity than we ever did. And then catching up is just going to be that much harder for us. So it's so off the moment, for us to make sure that these sort of, I don't know, centers of excellence, or, like, cohorts, and where the adequate representation is going to be very important. Because, as you rightly pointed out, Shika, and we talked about earlier, the role is shifting, the role is changing. And so let's define that change, let's be on the forefront of it, and let's be the ones trailblazing it and saying, all right, this is what the new role looks like. This is now your toolkit. And what does success look like in this stage? And that's how we kind of continue to make progress.
And this brings me right into the next question, and then you can take it. So, what do you think the future of the women in tech leadership actually looks like to you? What does the role look like? What are the real barriers standing between where we are today and that future?
The role, again, looks a little bit different than what it is today. When you and that may not necessarily even be gender specific, right? I think it is, across the industry, we are now seeing that, what AI has essentially done, and even in the last 2 months with the outburst from Claude itself, you can essentially see now every second person has the potential to be a software engineer.
Oh, absolutely.
So that just means there are more engineers that are building more things until things stop working, and then what do you do, right? Like, so I think the engineering role is now sort of evolving to a place where you're not going to need to use sound technical context, right level of business judgment to be able to, like, cater and define workflow based solutions. That's going to be so important. It's, again, very off the moment. I was even speaking about this within my own organization just today. And so when you think about that, now leading a team of engineers that need to now solve problems differently also means that your leadership needs to take that level of adjustment, so that you're enabling that level of success in the organization. So the evolution of, like, CTOs and CIOs is really more about, how am I basically solving this complex business issue with, like, high AI powered technology solution that can really drive meaningful results right away. It's no longer about, hey, I'm going to go into like a 6 months R&D and build a platform and build a digital capability, but it's really more of, like, how do I churn things much faster, but also how do I do more with less, right? I think that's the shift. And so leaders need to really embrace that. So I think that's where the future is. The barriers very much exist. I think I'll be very honest and vulnerable, right? Like, when you think about, like, when I think about my own career and, how it sort of evolved over all of these years, decades now, I'm dating myself, but, you're constantly like dealing with barriers like, hey, I don't have the right level of sponsor. I don't have the right level of person who can sort of enable me. And then women tend to need constant, they have to prove time and time again of like, hey, this is that overhead tax that we all bear, right? Like, you did it once, great, now do it again, then we'll know you're capable and competent. So some of that structural, dysfunctions still exist. They're not going away. But I think it's important for us to, again, as women leaders who are now in the seat, now just need to be able to consistently address those topics head on. So you're not just like passing this on to the next wave, to the next AI wave. So, yeah.
No, and I completely agree because I was this morning, I was reading about a post from one of the industry leaders, and he was saying, that AI is not a sprint, not a marathon, but it's actually a speedathon. And it kind of made sense because you have to be at that constant. So the way AI is coming in, it's so fast that we can't just sit back and relax and say, oh, okay, yes, we are working on it. We'll do 6 months research, like you said. It's a constant keeping up with that speed for the long run,
For the
right?
long run, yeah, yeah, and one other point I'll make, Sangeeta, if I may, is we talked about like leaders. We kind of have this. It's a huge responsibility for us to recognize that the role is changing, but also the change is happening very quickly. What the way we redefine the role today may not necessarily be the same a quarter out from now. So we're going to need to like reshape and readjust and pivot, and staying with that program is going to be the path to success.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we'll
Constant
get nowhere.
change. Constant change. Shika, what would you like to
Hi.
say about this?
Yeah, I'm getting the feedback that you guys are still not able to hear me well. So as I respond, I'm gonna turn off my video and turn it
Okay.
back on when I come back. Okay. Yeah, so I think Nandini definitely covers it and covered it very well. The overarching, what's happening and what shouldn't be happening, and how we need to, take charge and be taking the different angle on the same message, that just make sure that we are not getting busy stabilizing the old system while the others are architecting the new AI systems, because that will definitely lead to authority gap, and then it will be very, very hard to catch up. So make sure that we are auditing the high stakes project pipelines as leaders, as the participants, and making sure that we are also architects of the future, and there is a diversity in the world that we are building for the table that Nandini was saying earlier, right? There cannot be just one type of table being built by one type of the participants. So yeah, I think that's there have been barriers, but this one is to definitely watch out for.
Yes, and Shika, I totally again agree with both of you. I have the example of actually my sister-in-law who's completely in the financial field, and she was just telling me how in her own team, where she has really nothing to do with like STEM or anything, she is now learning to code for whatever she needs herself. And so we all, as not just as women, as anyone right now, we all just have to use AI to the best of our ability. And then whether we are in STEM or any other field, we use that, to increase the level we are at and get to that room where that leadership table is and find ourselves a seat. And the fact that, we have leaders like you, Shika, and you, Nandini, that's going to help because you're going to hopefully make more room at that table for all the diverse voices, right?
Yeah,
So
Nandini,
that,
sorry, to your point, I think the analogy comes to mind is that how math became simple with the scientific calculators when it came.
Yeah.
That's how software engineering is becoming so simple and so accessible to so many people with the help of AI. So it's not to be feared, but to leverage for our benefit.
Yeah. Ishika, don't get me started on that. I cannot convince my younger son to learn his spelling properly because he says there's a, spell check. Why do I need to know the spelling? So, I mean, that's kind of where we're going to, right? But that's, it's great that we have leaders like you up there. But how can companies ensure that AI systems themselves are not biased?
You want me to answer that, Sangeeta?
Yeah, please, Shika, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Again, going video of. Um, yeah, I think that's a most significant engineering challenges of our time because I feel like the bias is not just a bug, right? Which you can fix with a patch release. It's like a systemic risk to the
Yes.
the future that we're building,
Yeah.
and how companies can make sure that it doesn't exist in the system that we're building. I think we need to change and the way we think. It's not just the models anymore. It's a multi-layer system, as Jensen Huang of NVIDIA says all the time. That is 5-layer cake, and we need to start thinking in those layers. The three specific layers where I think the most of the software engineering or the leaders who work in the application domain comes into mind is one is definitely the provenance layer, where it's not just about having more data, it's about the provenance, knowing where the data has come from and what human biases were baked into it as at the source. If the data we use to train a model doesn't reflect the diversity of the community it serves, the model is malnourished from day one. And the second point is the evolution layer, right? Which is where the human in the loop becomes vital. We use reinforcement learning from human feedback to tune these models. But as Meera Bharati, has pointed, I'm sure many of you have heard and seen. She's been constantly saying that your human graders, if your human graders aren't diverse, you will incorrectly reward the AI for output that feels right to them, but it's biased against others. So we have to audit the auditors. The third point I would say is the operational layer. Many senior leaders like Dana, his Uber's CEO, and others are emphasizing that we need explainable AI. And what it means is that the algorithm can predict the pricing or the routing decisions, but we need to be able to pull back the curtains and ask why. Why is the
Right.
decision made? And if the model is in a black box, then we cannot, and if we cannot audit it at the real time, then it is not production ready. So I think the takeaway for us is that, and we need need a continuous process of stress testing the edge cases, and we need to intentionally look for where AI is breaking for various diverse groups in the world.
True. Yes, that is very true. Nandini?
Yeah, I mean, Shika, you make a really important point about the quality of that data that you're feeding in to do the training of the models. Absolutely, that's like table stakes. I'd probably even like take it a step further and say that we've got to also start treating fairness and bias as like a product feature, right?
Mhm.
The minute you put something as a capability set for anything that you're building, then there is that natural attention that goes towards it, and you start to like measure fairness. There define KPIs specifically that makes sense, and then you can actually like dedicate resources and capacity, so you're addressing very much like it's core of the product. Otherwise, to your point, Shika, it's not production ready. And the other thing I'd say is you've got to, you touched on this as like, don't think of it as a black box, but also once you've really pushed it to production and you feel it's ready, don't stop there. Oftentimes what happens is, especially now, we're moving so quickly that you build something. Let's say you build a couple agents that are like solving some very fundamental, problems in your org. You put these agents out there, you feel like you've done the level of testing that you needed, and then say, all right, I'm done, it's ready, I have an agent there, I put it on OpenClaw, I'm all good to go. But you can't stop there, because the minute you do, then you don't know what kind of drift you will start to see in some of those, in those systems. So I think, that then naturally gives rise to, lack of trust, or like misplaced trust, right? Like, and then you're just now building your entire organizational workflow out of these agents that are fundamentally flawed, but they were not flawed when you launched them into prod to begin with. So it's this constant loop. And again, as I say, the compounding effect of it all, I think, is going to be so key for us.
Yeah, and it's a huge loss for the company, because if there is no trust with the customer, then you lose the reputation of being that the company that
Exactly.
serves the consumer. So
Exactly.
very well said, Nandini. Yeah.
Yep, so true. And then reputation loss, we know, is far more expensive than we can ever put a number to it. So
For sure. You go from being on the top to like bankruptcy in the blink of a second, right? Blink
yeah,
of an eye.
yeah.
So, for just shifting this a little bit, what career decisions do you think helped you accelerate your growth in technology leadership? So, Nandini, let's start with you.
Interesting question. I think primarily when you think about career decisions that I've made, I think it's always been about leveraging judgment and being able to embrace change. It's not easy, right? It's not easy. I know a version of myself that struggled with it too. But I think, now more than ever, that starts to become a very critical aspect. So when you think about careers, especially in tech leadership, then you've got to recognize, know how to read the tea leaves in some ways, because not that everybody has a crystal ball and you can read it and come up with a plan and a vision and a mission doc or anything, but you at the same time just need to start thinking about what does change entail. And when you think about the blast radius of a change, you cannot really stop, with one pillar or one sliver or like one part of the organization. As a CTO, as a head of engineering organization, you have got to start piecing it to what that really means for the fundamental business metric. And if you're not able to bridge the gap of the two together, then it feels like it's very hard to be successful in a leadership role, especially with the AI wave. So I think that to me feels like a big career decision, and also maybe a career, inflection point now. I know, but
And
curious to your Shika's thoughts too.
no, that's totally wonderful. I love the read the tea leaves part, and that's actually true, not just for leadership, but it's been true for so many things, right? The ones, even the companies that we see that are successful now are the ones that have kept up with the change. Uh, you know, take the example of just Blockbuster and Netflix, right? I mean, it's as simple as that. So you gotta read the room, read the tea leaves, whatever you need to do, but just go with embrace the change, like you said. Shika, what do you think it's for you?
Yeah, I'll go off. So I think Nandini definitely covered the essential part of the change, like be open to the change. And I think the things on the change part, like what has helped me when I look back in my 20 plus year career, is that it was never about finding the perfect role. It was finding the high uncertainty projects, right? Added with the change. It's a change, but most ambiguous, highly uncertain, prioritizing complexity and scale over stability of my career. Whether it was at my time at eBay when I was a backend engineer and I went and joined a mobile team, completely nervous, panicking in my heart inside, but then taking on that. I think it has pushed me to learn newer technologies, and stay up to date. And similarly, when I moved from eBay to Uber, I had only done B2C in my entire life, but in Uber, I took on a B2B side of the world. So just I think, try to expand your technical intuition, and that pushes you out of your comfort zone in a way, in the ways which will grow people, and that has worked for me. I think the other thing that has helped me, which will become a natural course in the world of AI, is moving away from being the expert to the enabler, where I'm not the doer of the most complex thing, but I am the person who's architecting the environment where others can thrive and succeed. So I think, yeah, just two things: prioritize the hard problem, be open to the change, and try to look for the next level pivots that the people who are at the next level, what do they do? I think observation also becomes a good teacher.
That's great. I love this, Shikha. That stepping out of your comfort zone now more than ever, so important, right? Especially with AI. And I love that architecting the environment. It's like the assist that you provide in basketball, right? You're not making the dunks or whatever, but providing the assist. You're showing people the path, and just it's really cool that that you're saying this, because it just gives everyone else the impetus to go say, okay, don't be afraid of stepping out of your comfort zone, because that obviously has really helped you in your career. So thank you for that. And I think that kind of brings me, oh no, I have a couple more questions. Um, there is a question about AI is changing the nature of work fast. And for many people, that's exciting and scary at the same time, like, I just mentioned earlier, right? So, what skills and mindsets should early career professionals or those considering a career shift develop today to not just survive, but thrive in an AI driven world? And um, I am asking this question because I have a dog in the race. I have a child just graduating. And this is something that I would love to know what you ladies are thinking of, because it's been going through my mind as well. So, Shika, do you want to start?
Sure. Yeah, I think as I mentioned earlier, we are moving from the era of information technology into the intelligence production, right? That's the industrial revolution that we are going to see, or we are seeing, beginning to see. And this is not just a tech boom that is happening in Silicon Valley. It's happening where technology meets the physical world. And the real impact we'll see in the industries like, agriculture, healthcare, manufacturing, where these weren't the tech first industries always, but they are about to be transformed by the intelligence factory. All of you have heard the word. And but when the execution of work is being automated, the skill that you need to thrive would be shifting from labor to logic. Right? That's the theme that the whole of conversation, this session we are talking about, is like, how do we become the architects of the future? So that's actually, I think women have some sort of superpower here, because we are definitely very good at problem decomposition, taking a larger problem, breaking it down, organizing, and how do we make an end-to-end system. So moving from, a individual program or a class or syntax to a system thinking, which is our strength, and we need to leverage that. Have no fear. I think that my main message is like, it's we are playing to our strengths here. And the second, I would say that fear comes from when you start competing with the AI. But AI brings the speed. It does not So the generation, as I mentioned earlier, it's going to be key. So, in my mind, in my mind, AI is a high-speed engine, but there's no map, right? It's a car that doesn't know how to go, by itself to a destination unless the destination is fed, unless the map is fed to it. So I think definitely our role is going to become providers of these architectural intent, um, and the systemic clarity in this ambiguous world of automated AI. Very happy that there is going to be more industry opening up where we can contribute.
Nandini, what do you think?
Shika covered a lot of very valid points. I think, you hit the nail on the head here. It's not about fearing it and saying, is AI really going to come and replace me? But really thinking about it as how can I lead myself and my role and my job better with AI? I'll give an analogy, right? I always say this to a lot of people in my teams in my career. I've said that my hiring philosophy has always been about hire the lazy people, because when you hire somebody who's inherently lazy as a personality trait, they're not going to want to repeat the same thing they're doing twice or thrice, right? They're going to be like, how the heck am I automating myself out of this? Like, I don't want to be doing this mundane task over and over again. And guess what? Now you have, as I said, the toolkit that makes this part so much easier. And so through that, you're essentially like driving up your value, up the chain in terms of what really matters to the organization. So, anyone that's like in, early career, Sangeeta, your son coming into the workforce, you really have to think about, AI is just enabling me, and no longer do you need to like go out and put on your resume that, hey, I'm familiar with Claude or GPT or whatever. That's just a given. Like, if you're having to say that's a problem. That's just a given, and you now can say, what have you done with it, and how has that made an impact to the organization? That's going to be really the key for anyone, in early career stage at this point. And what that means for my son and my daughter, who are like 9 and 12, I have no idea, but I'll find out.
Well, with things that are changing so fast, I don't think you even want to start thinking about it
I
right
don't
now.
think so. Yeah, I got Claude for kids for my son. He's 9 and he's building games, and it's like enabling his thinking. So they're not even thinking about coding as a separate skill, right? Like, it's
No.
inherent. It's very much like learning how to do long division.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Everyday life, everyday
every
life.
day.
So,
Yeah.
what gives you the most optimism about the future of AI and the people building it, then, Nandini?
I think it's the possibility of what we can build together. Like, before there were certain barriers to how you can sort of, imagine, the world. Like, if you think about like simple product development, B2B, B2C, whatever it is that you're building. I'm in a world right now where I almost think of it as B2B to B2C, right? Like, I'm in the group benefits industry. So when you think about things like that, there's always been like certain product or digital experience barriers that you would naturally hit, right? Like, the market forces, what's the appetite for revenue growth, are we now relying heavily on like, certain type of distribution channels, all kinds of problems that we all face. Shika, I know you're, at Uber, I'm sure you're dealing with this very much, all the time. So now when you think about it, some of those barriers kind of go away, right? Like, because you can now create a digital experience that is like none other. And what was not possible, even 3 months ago, you can now fathom it, you can now think about it. So that's what gets me most riled up about it. And it's like the next generation of folks in the organization where they're going through that role evolution and like seeing what's possible. I think it's so energizing, it's inspiring for me in so many ways.
That's great. I am really looking forward to that bright future. Shikha, do you want to have a go?
I think Nandini definitely covered it all, and those are exactly my thoughts. I think I'm just happy about the democratization of creation. His her son is coding or not coding, vibe coding, but creating stuff that is, we could not think for ourselves, a couple of years back, until a couple of years back. People, I think I need to turn on my camera, sorry. Yeah, so the people, there are a lot of people in the world who are brilliant, but may have not had the opportunity to go to, get a formal education, college degree, but they have a lot of real life experience, and they have the brilliance, and they are connected to the real world on the ground. And it just becomes a tool for them to create whatever is needed to solve their individual problems. I feel like, yes, there is going to be industrial revolution. Yes, there is going to be companies behind changing the big things, but there is going to be a lot of enablement of the at a local level. A lot of people will be leveraging AI and solving their community's problem. And I think that's going to be the real power, where we will see, as human race, we are progressing towards more creation and less towards mundane job, doing the mundane job.
This is great. No, I completely agree with you about the democratization, because it's kind of like when we first got mobile phones, right? Suddenly, everybody had access to communication and even media. So I think that with AI, it just goes further. And hopefully, especially with women, it'll help. Even if it doesn't close the gap, at least starting to close the gap. I feel like COVID did a lot of it, did some of it for women, when everybody had to be home and everybody had to face the same circumstances. And then I feel like AI is probably getting us a little bit closer, but we have to keep our eye out to make sure that, like there is room for everyone and that there is no bias on one side. And like you said, Nandini, that the data that we gather is going to be really important to cover everyone. I am going to open this up. I know we are getting really close to the end of the hour, but let's see if we can get a couple of questions in here. Anuj has a question. He says, as Anuj Segal says, as leaders of high performing organizations, what keeps you up at night these days from an org level standpoint? Disruption, internal innovation, ROI, cost optimization, right shoring, scalability, or something completely different? And Nandini, do you want to go first?
Sure. Definitely cost optimization. I think that, it's such an important topic at the moment. I think while we've talked, I think the better part of the hour about, the possibilities of AI and how that's really changing it and embracing it, we're enabling a ton of experimentation in the organization. But with that, obviously, comes a high cost. And so certainly that is something that I know it's very active conversation, lots of leadership forums. So, I'd imagine others sharing the same thing. And I think it related to that is also scalability, right? Like now, it's just given rise to, it's given rise to a ton of different agents, ton of different agentic solutions. We've got Gen AI product, work that's happening. When you start to think about all of that, I think we reached our MVP line very quickly. But how do you really scale from there? And balance that with the appropriate level of cost and how much is okay. Those are very much things that literally keep me up at night.
Shikha?
Yeah, I think definitely cost is one of the factors. And in addition to that, I think cost is also a problem, though, that all of the leadership is looking at. What keeps me up at night is the quality and the reliability, the observability of these systems that we are building, and we are automating, building agents that are taking care of our customers. How do we find the problems? Because it's high speed, right? As you all said, it's high speed. So if we have a mistake, we fasten the speed at which it can reach and scale. The problem can scale. So how do we catch those in time? And how do we make sure that we are able to act as fast, equally as fast as we are putting out? So a lot of focus on the quality, reliability, observability to make sure that these agents do not regress. I think earlier we discussed that it's easy to put it out there, but how do we make sure that they are not regressing, and we are constantly able to adhere to the quality that we expect. So that's definitely on my mind as well.
That's great. I love these answers. Another question: when dealing with imposter syndrome as a woman in tech, how do I not let others' underestimation reinforce my self doubt? And Shika, did you want to take this one?
Sure. I think the imposter syndrome is something I'm going to say. Hopefully, it makes sense. It's not controversial. Okay, it is not a thing to fear. It is a thing to integrate. It's a signal that we are giving ourselves, our body is giving, our mind is giving to us, that there's something is missing. Maybe it's preparation, maybe it's a little bit of confidence in that area. Maybe it's something else, for depending on your situation, your environment that you are in. Maybe you need more support. So just pay attention to that and say, it's okay, I've got you. I've got you. I attention. I don't think, honestly, imposter syndrome is something that people can read. It's more internally for us. And I have it too, being vulnerable here. I get it too. I initially used to, let it ride me. Now I am riding it. The minute I realize that this is the formula, that I need to listen to it, take care of what I need to fix, and then, go on. I'm not saying it's not real. Don't get me wrong. I say, but it's not about anybody else to writing you.
Shika, we lost you there for a second, but I think
Okay.
the gist. Nandini, let me ask you the same thing. So when you're dealing with imposter syndrome as a woman in tech, so first there's this, you have this imposter syndrome, and then there are others who are underestimating you, and that's reinforcing your self-doubt. So how do you not let others' underestimation reinforce your self-doubt?
It's Look, it's not an easy feat, but I agree with what Shika is saying. You cannot let it define you, and you cannot let it drive you, right? So each one of us is probably going to need to find our own way to deal with that imposter. And to everybody, there's a certain method that helps you come out of it. I think, for me, I've switched the narrative when I have to go into, when I start to see myself go into a deep dark place. And believe me, I do. We all do, whether it's visibly, it's visible or not. But you've got to recognize how you, switch the narrative and make it a bit more of a positive turn, and saying, well, are you doubting me because I'm bringing something new to the table and that you're not? Or are you doubting me for something else? And it's a very important question to ask yourself first before you put the question out. And I think that's really how you want to, completely like move the conversation of imposter within between yourself and your conscience, to like putting it out there and saying, flip it around. If you're like the only person in the room with a certain opinion and you're being questioned about it, I think it's okay to call out that it was the only opinion on the room, and it was informed by certain set of facts. And if they're doubting it, maybe there's a herd mentality there, right? Like, so flip the narrative. And I think being bold and putting the facts out there, I think is going to be so critical. Don't let that drive you.
Thank you. I love it. I love the whole everywhere that everything that we have talked about is, flip the narrative, be bold, just embrace the change. And I think that's all very important. We are at time, and I hate to cut this short but I do want to be respectful of everyone's calendars. I know Rachel tells me we have a bunch of other questions, but I think this is a good time to wrap up. It has been a fascinating conversation. I have learned so many things today, or absorbed so many things today. I love the reading the tea leaves. I love the embracing the change. I love that the to hear that the gap is closing, but we need to keep the momentum, and that you two are in a place where you can help with that. So I really want to thank both of you, Shikha and Nandini, for sharing not just your expertise, but your vision for a truly inclusive digital economy, and what it looks like. And to everyone watching, the room where it happens is getting bigger, the gap is getting smaller, and there is a seat in it for you. Thank you for joining us, for your questions, or being part of this conversation. And we look forward to seeing how you all continue to lead in your own space. And that's a wrap for today. And I will see you all next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.